We are going back to the moon. Not in 10 years, not in 5 years, not even in 1. In 10 days, as of the publication of this video, astronauts will travel to the moon for the first time in 54 years. The rocket is already on the pad. The crew of 4 is ready to fly over the far side of the moon, beating the record of the furthest distance from Earth humans have ever traveled to. Let me present to you the Artemis 2 mission. First, let's take a look at the Artemis 2 rocket. Here's the Artemis 2 rocket rolling out to its launch pad in Florida. It's called the Space Launch System, or SLS. The little white part here at the top of the rocket is the capsule, where the astronauts are going to be during their trip to the moon. And everything that's below it is the rocket itself. The big orange part in the middle, that we call the core stage, is where most of the energy of the rocket actually is. And the 2 side boosters on the side of the rocket are mainly here to provide a big amount of thrust at liftoff. And here's an animation of what a typical SLS launch looks like. After some time, the side boosters are emptied of their fuel, and so they are jettisoned from the rocket. The core stage then gets the astronauts to orbit. Once that is done, the second stage, which is called the ICPS, and the Orion capsule separate from the core stage. The ICPS is what's actually gonna get the Orion capsule most of the way to the moon. But this is not the first flight of SLS. SLS already launched about 3 years ago during the Artemis 1 mission.
And here we go. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
The goal of this mission was to test the SLS rocket and the Orion capsule uncrewed. So here's the booster separating, and Orion separating from the ICPS on its way to the moon.
1972 during the final Apollo
surface.
missions.
We're going beyond anywhere we ever went for Apollo.
The Orion spacecraft.
And after its trip to the moon, the Orion capsule went back to Earth, deploying its parachutes and splashing down in the ocean.
Back on Earth.
This mission was critical for testing propulsion systems, navigation systems, and many more on SLS and Orion. Overall, it was an almost flawless flight. There's one thing that didn't go quite as expected, and that thing was the heat shield of Orion. When Orion comes back from the moon, it goes at about 11 kilometers per second, and it has to bleed off all that velocity in order to land on Earth safely. And to do that, it slows down in the atmosphere. To not completely burn from the heat of re-entry, Orion needs a heat shield. And that heat shield got quite damaged during the mission. Here's what it looks like. If we zoom in, you can see that there's whole chunks missing from the heat shield. This was quite a big concern for NASA, and it actually got the Artemis 2 mission delayed quite a bit, because you wouldn't want the heat shield to fail when humans are on board. But they're pretty confident that they have a solution. After a lot of testing and simulation, the NASA engineers think that increasing the angle of re-entry could limit the amount of damage. By re-entering the Earth's atmosphere at a steeper angle, the duration of re-entry is going to be much shorter. They're confident that this re-entry profile will produce less damage on the heat shield. So now let's take a look at the actual Artemis 2 mission.
4 astronauts will venture around the moon, preparing humanity for a long-term lunar presence for scientific discovery and exploration. The mission will prove the Orion spacecraft is ready to keep astronauts alive in deep space and allow the crew and ground teams to practice operations essential to the success of future missions.
So the Artemis 2 mission is a test flight, just like Artemis 1, except that this time there are actual astronauts on board. Artemis 2 will not land on the moon, they will just go around it, which is already pretty significant. And all of this is in preparation for Artemis 3, the actual lunar landing with astronauts.
Stacked on the mobile launcher, NASA's 322-foot-tall SLS, or Space Launch System rocket with the Orion spacecraft awaits the crew. When the countdown reaches 0, the umbilicals retract, giving SLS and the crew in Orion the clearance to begin the journey.
Here I have the real to-scale trajectory of Artemis 2. At this point of the mission, we are here. The dark blue ball is the Earth, of course. The rocket launches right here. It first performs a short 90-minute orbit around the Earth.
After a 90-minute orbit, the engine of the rocket's upper stage, or ICPS, ignites to raise Orion to a high Earth orbit.
Then the ICPS puts Orion on the orange orbit, which is a high Earth orbit, where it will do many new exciting experiments and prepare for the actual trip to the moon about a day later.
Once in high Earth orbit, Orion separates from the upper stage. The expended ICPS and Orion stage adapter serve as a target for a manual handling test, preparing future crews for rendezvous, docking, and undocking with other spacecraft. About 23 hours later, Orion's service module performs the Translunar Injection Burn, or TLI, pushing Orion out of Earth orbit and on an approximately 4-day trip to the moon.
Which puts it on the red orbit, which is, as you can see, quite big, because it goes all the way to the moon.
The Artemis II crew travels about 4,600 miles beyond the moon, becoming the first humans to lay eyes on the lunar far side in over 50 years.
What she's talking about here is the little part at the bottom of the image. As you can see, the astronauts will go beyond the moon, and they will go quite far.
Their observations will help us prepare for future missions at the moon. During this period, there will be an anticipated communication blackout between mission control and the spacecraft.
Just like the Apollo missions, when the capsule goes behind the moon, there's no connection with Earth anymore. So there will be a communication blackout period where the astronauts will literally be on their own, several hundreds of thousands of kilometers away from Earth.
As the crew returns from the far side of the moon, Orion is drawn home by Earth's gravity in a free return trajectory, ensuring a fuel-efficient 4-day trip.
The other interesting thing about this trajectory is that it is a free return trajectory, which means that as long as the astronauts are on the red trajectory here, when departing from Earth, they will return to Earth no matter what happens. So if something goes wrong and they can't fire the engine anymore, that trajectory has been thought to kind of play with the gravities of both the moon and the Earth so that it would naturally come back to Earth without having to modify the trajectory or anything. So this is fuel efficient, of course, but it also maximizes the safety of the astronauts.
Orion and the crew enter Earth's atmosphere at a speed of nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Orion's heat shield protects the spacecraft from temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the sun. 3 pilot chutes lift the 3 main parachutes, deployed at an altitude of 9,000 feet and traveling 130 miles per hour. These chutes slow the crew module to a speed of less than 20 miles per hour.
Slowing the capsule down
After traveling
for its
more than
final splashdown in the ocean.
Their mission complete, the crew is flown back to land and step on solid ground for the first time in 10 days.
So this is what the entire 10-day Artemis II mission is going to look like. What everyone is looking forward to, of course, is astronauts seeing the surface of the moon for the first time in 54 years, from just a few thousand kilometers away. So these are some of the views that the astronauts will get during their flyby. But now you might wonder, who are these lucky 4 astronauts? The commander of the mission is Reed Wiseman. He has previously flown once to the International Space Station in 2014, spending 165 days in space. During that mission, he performed extravehicular activities and many more scientific experiments. The pilot of the mission is Victor Glover. This is also his second flight to space, as he previously flew during SpaceX's Crew 1 mission in 2021. He also performed many experiments and extravehicular activities on the International Space Station. Look at this guy, one of my favorite astronauts actually. Then we have mission specialist Christina Cook, also her second flight to space, but unlike the previous 2, her mission was about twice as long, since she stayed 328 days in space, the longest single spaceflight by a woman. And here are some photos of her inside and outside the International Space Station. Now, all of these are Americans, but the last one is actually Canadian. Jeremy Henson. This is actually his first flight into space, and he's going to the moon. That's quite something. He is also a mission specialist for this flight, and he will be the first non-American to go to the moon. Now, you might have noticed that most of these astronauts actually don't have a lot of experience in space. They've only flown once at most. You know, some astronauts do 2 or 3 missions or probably even more. And the reason behind that is that on their journey to the moon, they're gonna get quite a lot of radiation. So NASA wanted to make sure that they wouldn't exceed the total amount of radiation that they could take during their life. This mission is the equivalent of Apollo 8, which was also a lunar flyby in 1968. And the follow-up to that mission is Artemis 3, which itself is the equivalent of Apollo 11, the first time humans landed on the moon. Since this is quite risky, they want to make sure that Orion is perfectly qualified to fly humans. But Orion Orion can't actually land on the moon. For this, they will need a lander, which is developed by SpaceX. Orion will dock to the lander in lunar orbit. The lander will then land on the moon. After some time spent on the surface, it will fly back to orbit, dock with Orion once again, so that the astronauts can come back to Earth on Orion. But this is not all, as they will go to an orbit which is, I think, the wildest orbit I have ever seen. Tell me in the comments if you'd like to have a video about Artemis 3. After our return to the moon, there will be many missions to establish a permanent settlement on the moon, but that's for later. Now there's something quite cool that you can do on Artemis 2, which is sending your name to the moon. You can go on this website, the link is down there in the description of the video. What you can do is literally write your name. It will generate a boarding pass, and this boarding pass is going to be stored on an SD card, which is going to be inside the Orion capsule that's going to fly to the moon. So if you want to include your name or of people in your family or whatever, go check this out in the description. Now, the launch of Artemis 2 is currently scheduled for the 6th of February 2026, so stay tuned.